All right, everyone, welcome back to Reinforce here in Philadelphia. I'm Art Baudo, one of your hosts for this segment, and joining me is my co-host, Jasmine. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Art. Nice to see you.
Absolutely. This has been quite the day of great things, demos, and new features that we've been able to discuss with people about security at AWS here, right?
Yeah, it's been very fun.
Ton of fun. And joined to my right, or both of our right here, is JD Bean. JD, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do here at Amazon?
Sure, absolutely. So, hi, I am JD Bean. I am a principal security architect with Amazon EC2, right? That's our virtualization service. And I get to work with customers and with our engineering teams around some of the core security of EC2 and also some of the security features that are enabled and exposed to customers for them to use in their workloads.
Nice.
So, exactly. And one of the things I think that's great, and the opportunity that Jasmine and I have gotten here is there, to work with a lot of the security architects here at AWS and be able to talk about that today. So one of the things we're going to talk about here is a topic that we had discussed a little bit earlier this year with Anthony Liguori and Colm McCarthy-Kame, who wrote a blog about securing AI, which I think we've all heard about AI and the need to
We've heard a lot about it this week, and everybody's like, surprise, we're building all these fun things and spinning up AI applications, and now they need to be secure.
Right. And so, and because there's a lot of topic in there, we wanted to get into, I wanted to bring JD on here, Jasmine, to talk a little bit about that element. But first, maybe we should step back a little bit to talk about what we call confidential compute, because I think that is an incredible launch point here into exactly what customers need to do, because I know there's still a lot of customers, Jasmine, surprised not doing AI, right, at this point.
Right.
So, JD, can you define for us what is confidential compute from an AWS perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like confidential computing is one of those terms that's just really useful to level set on. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
We take a perspective that's ultimately rooted in like our customer conversations and what their concerns are, and we work backwards from that. So, after years of having conversations with customers about some of their concerns, we sort of came to understand confidential computing to really be about the use of specialized hardware, associated firmware, to protect customer code and data while it is in use. Things like encryption in transit or encryption at rest are pretty well-established terms, but I think kind of newer in our industry is this idea of being able to protect data while it is actually being used and processed.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, because most people understand when data is sitting in storage in your S3 bucket, for example, or is being just physically moved around, it's encrypted, right?
Yep.
So then the question is when the data is being acted upon, traditionally it has to, you have to unencrypt it, so it has some possible exposure, right? And the question is while it's being used, it gets protected. And so that's part of what I'm hearing from you say about confidential compute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that captures it really, really well, right? There are like advanced mathematical techniques to be able to operate on data without encrypting it, but these are technologies that are not general purpose. They tend to require a lot of deep specialization, and with confidential computing, we're able to offer more accessible and more generalizable ways for customers to protect that data and code while it's in use. And I think one of the things that's really come out of our customer conversations is that there's two very distinct dimensions and concerns that go on in this space, right? One of them is kind of concern about and desire for protection of data while it's in use from like the underlying operator of the infrastructure.
That would be
AWS, basically, right? Like my colleagues on the EC2 team. And so that is something that we actually address using a technology that I am super passionate about, which is the Nitro system.
Okay.
And that has tons of benefits, right, for customers from sustainability and performance and price and rate of innovation. But security, which I am a security nerd, is one of its really, really big differentiators. So with the AWS Nitro system, right, any instance that we've released since 2018, we basically provide confidential computing by default for our customers. We just do not have any mechanism whatsoever for AWS operators to access like the contents of a customer's EC2 instance or to obtain data from an encrypted EBS volume. We just don't have the capability.
And one thing I wanted to bring up, because I was working on this beforehand, is that we've had a tradition at Amazon where some of the oldest instances back to our start in 2006 are still available today. So, and JD mentions the launch of the Nitro system, which started in 2017, and in 2018, all instances since then have been there. But to give an idea to people out there, more than 90% of our current instances that are launched on a daily basis use that Nitro system. So it's a small fraction of instances that don't even use the Nitro system. So when you ask us, why do we spend so much time talking about Nitro system and not other things? It's because the vast majority of customers, that's what everything is based off of. And not that there wasn't security beforehand, it's just we did enhancements that we started then.
Yeah. When customers ask me, like, how can I get started on the Nitro system and what do I have to do to adopt this confidential computing, I love that I can actually respond to them, by the law of averages and everything I know about customers, there's a very good chance you're using it already. You're already benefiting from it. It's turned on by default. It's embedded in the platform, and it's something that you don't have to make any choices about. You don't have to pay anything extra or set anything up, right? It's just something that's sort of baked in.
Yeah, and I've heard this term confidential compute. What is that?
Right. Okay. So as I mentioned, I guess I got distracted. I told you I was passionate about the Nitro system.
Yeah.
So we talked about that first dimension, right? That's the protection of this stuff from the cloud operator, and that's kind of just basically the default with Nitro. The second dimension of confidential computing that sometimes came up in our customer conversations, it was less prevalent, but it was something we heard, was about the ability for customers to actually be able to isolate customer content and data while it's in use from their own operators or from their own, their partners. Maybe there's two organizations that don't want to fully trust each other, but want to come together to collaborate using sensitive data and code. And that's a technology where we use something that's powered by the Nitro system, but is a different offering called the Nitro Enclave to enable customers to kind of build things or build applications that they can make the same type of claims that we can make for the Nitro system. They can say and point and say, this application is something where it runs within my infrastructure and on my instance, but I don't have any mechanism to access the sensitive data inside this.
Yeah. That's really reassuring, and that's interesting, right? Like, you want to bring people together to work on it and solve customer challenges, but you don't need to know all of the information and the nitty-gritty of it.
Exactly. And I think I think for the Nitro enclaves, excuse me, JD's correct. There haven't, when we started this journey here, there were some customer requests on developing. That's the reason we developed Nitro enclaves. But I think there's more and more use cases that I'm hearing from customers that have additional interest in it. Maybe one of the things we should talk about before we go a little bit further is maybe one or two customer examples of folks using Nitro enclaves as it is now. And I know we promised some Gen AI stuff here too, and we will definitely get to that.
There.
But maybe, because I think a lot of people aren't just doing Gen AI. Do you want to start with maybe one or two examples here to give an even better idea?
Yeah, so one of the examples that I think is really awesome is Stripe. So Stripe joined us on stage at reInvent late last year to talk about their journey with Nitro Enclaves. They moved from internal usage of hardware security modules. If you're not super familiar with working with HSMs, you're lucky. They're super powerful and super important, but they don't have the best reputation for being incredibly developer friendly. And Stripe wanted to kind of raise the bar on their ability to take full advantage of cloud, right? The scalability, the flexibility, the rate of change that would enable. And so they actually moved from running a lot of their workloads based on an HSM fleet into a programmable Nitro enclave that was almost like a software-based HSM that could run alongside their workload and provide high-assurance cryptographic operations for their workloads in the same way that they had with HSMs. And I thought that was such an easy to capture and really exciting use case to hear from them about their journey, some of their learnings, and I definitely encourage folks to check out the video.
Yeah, I'll just mention one other thing, since So I don't know if everybody knows who Stripe is in the first place, and maybe we should mention that, believe it or not, if you don't think you know who Stripe is, you've likely gone to some place that uses Stripe, at least for credit card processing purposes. So for those out there who have been to a coffee shop recently and got a cup of coffee this morning, you may have used Stripe and you didn't even realize it, type thing.
Yeah. So we do have a question in the chat, JD. So someone says, so this is something I don't have to set up as long as I stood up a recent EC2 AMI. This is going back to the Nitro.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, that is absolutely the beauty, right? If you are launching any EC2 instance released since 2018, you are getting the full benefit of what I said earlier in terms of confidential computing with the Nitro system. That is just inherent to what it means to be a modern EC2 instance.
And so in following up on this, I think that one of the things that we had announced in early 2023 was that we're so confident in some of this confidential compute. Boy, I don't know about all these words running together, but okay. We're so confident that we invited a third-party company, Jasmine, to come to Amazon and evaluate and look at our architecture here as well. And so I believe they have certified that we have those protections, and the company was a cybersecurity firm out of the UK called NCC Group. So if you could maybe say a little bit more about that, and then we'll drop a link for anybody to take a look at the NCC Group information into the chat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So like my job, I love my job. I am like a kid in a candy store, and I get to work really closely with these engineering teams that are building this incredible technology. So like everyone can meet me, and I can talk about the Nitro system, and I seem really excited, but like, I think our customers deserve and wanted more from us. They wanted, to have maybe some of the same type of information and conversations and deep dives that I get to have every day themselves. And so one of the first things that we did with the Nitro system, recently in providing greater transparency and assurance is publishing a really deep white paper that actually walks through how the system is designed and how it provides its security outcomes. We wanted to kind of keep pushing that ball forward. And so we brought in the NCC Group. They spent quite a bit of time with us deep diving in the Nitro system and really validating that key claim that we make. Right now, technically, 7 claims, and it's a little bit technical. You can go and read the report itself. But the basic outcome there is that the NCC didn't find any gaps with our overall claims about operator access mechanisms in the Nitro system. And that was really important to be able to share this third-party view with our customers. Along with that, we did something that I think is also really, really important, which is we took these simple words, and we actually placed them into our customer agreement. That's the, for those who don't pay attention to like legal agreements and stuff like that is the sort of one of the agreements that governs, our relationship with all of our customers. And so this is like, there's a section in there, I think it's like section 96 or something, that really just captures really simply and clearly exactly what we've been saying about the Nitro system and its absence of operator access mechanisms.
I just want to say it's impossible for anybody to discern that you were once a lawyer.
Because he knew exactly where it was in the customer terms.
Jasmine, do you have the customer terms memorized? Section 96.
No, not at all, but I know where to find this now. So, and we actually call this the Digital Sovereignty Pledge.
Yep.
And I saw that Matt Garman, when this came out, he wrote a blog post on it. And, some of the things that are in there that say there's no mechanism for a cloud provider employee to log into its underlying host. No administrative API access can access customer content, right? Mm-hmm. Some of those little things like that are, not just little things. We broke them down into really brief statements, but those are the things that are big that help us to earn that customer trust and also keep it.
And I think the other thing, JD mentioned both the NCC Group work, but also the white paper that he alluded to as well that's off of our Nitro page. But this is part of a message that Matt Garman, now our CEO, has reiterated that about security is transparency from our side. And so part of the NCC Group work and also the white paper is all of you out there, we understand security is we're asking you to do some trust with us as well, and we're trying to also say you don't just have to trust words or us speaking up here. It's a lot more than that, and there's something more behind this, and that's the white paper with detailed architecture diagrams, and that's the architectural analysis and work behind the scenes that a group such as NCC Group has been able to do. So I find the two of them combined together, are really important. And by the way, this is just the start of that transparency effort that's here. So in addition, we started here talking about AI, and I'd like to kind of swing a little bit toward talking about that a little bit more. And so this year, as I mentioned, Anthony and Colm published a discussion about AI data and the importance of protecting it. And we know security is that top priority, but maybe you can talk about those 3 layers in the generative AI stack that we're working to protect and give information about that for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, AI and AI workloads and security of AI have been a really important topic in the industry recently, and particularly for this event, right? Where security and AI have really come together. I think it's probably useful just defining kind of what we mean by AI data, right? AI data is all the sensitive, data that's going to be involved in an AI workload, right? There's the data that you train a model with, right? Like kind of the input data, which can be really sensitive at times, depending upon the model. There are the weights of the model itself, which represent a tremendous amount of investment from the model trainer. And it is pretty important proprietary information. And then there's also things like the prompts or the inference outputs, the things that go in and out of the model for a useful workload.
Yeah.
All these can be really sensitive.
Yeah, and I think, I don't remember if it was Jasmine and I, but yesterday we did a discussion with some of our other teammates, Suresh and Sudhir, who we demoed protecting some of the inputs into those models as well, where you potentially have to provide some of these large language models with personal information that you don't want to be
shared back.
Thank you, shared back. So such as age, date, birthday, that sort of thing that you want to anonymize. So we showed some of that anonymization. So okay, so back JD to here. This is protection of that data.
So, when we think about running kind of on the infrastructure level, and like we've talked a bunch, Chris Betts, for example, in his keynote mentioned these different layers of AI, right? There's that bottom layer that's about, AI infrastructure for building and training LLMs. There's the middle layer, which provides access to models themselves so that you can kind of build a workload using one of these models. And then there's the top layer that are applications that offer, foundational model or LLM-backed features. I'm mostly focused at the bottom layer, which is where I think this becomes really relevant. So, our approach to secure AI infrastructure really is about kind of three principles, basically, right? The first, and there's going to be some parallel here, is just the complete isolation of the AI data, these types of sensitive data and proprietary information that I mentioned earlier from the infrastructure operator. And that is, as I mentioned, inclusive of model weights, inputs, training data, all that type of stuff. And that's something that, surprise, surprise, is actually like totally in line with exactly how we've designed the Nitro system to begin with. So when customers use a Nitro instance with an accelerator like Trainium or Inferentia or a GPU attached to it, all of those same no operator access elements are all in place. And nothing is really different because there's a GPU involved, right?
Right.
AWS operators still have no mechanism to get access to any of the AI data in a customer's EC2 instance or encrypted on a local disk or anything like that.
So this is in alignment with the earlier statement. So when we say that there is no access to, operators at AWS have no access to content, that also includes AI data, because much of that AI data is using the AWS Nitro system, which, as we mentioned before, we don't have access to. So kind of connecting some of the dots here as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into that second principle.
Right. So I set the stage here. There'd be 3 principles. Second principle is really providing customers with an ability for them to isolate AI data from themselves, like from the customer operator of the infrastructure, and that would be like, say the administrator of an EC2 instance. And that is something where we actually kind of comes into play something like Nitro Enclaves, where like the types of use cases you mentioned being on the stream earlier really come into play, right? The idea of being able to run something where you actually put, for example, the model in an environment where even you can't access it. And the third is really about protecting infrastructure communications, right? So we want to make sure that we've got end-to-end encryption in place. Anytime AI data needs to be, out on an exposed device.
Okay. So we have the three principles. I think we spent a little bit of time here talking about Nitro enclaves. We talked about yesterday, and we showed, actually demonstrated via some architectural diagrams how to set it up. But I think a couple of valid questions that happen that I think they're here all the time is how do customers, excuse me, set it up? I think if I understand you correct, JD, for Nitro system, just out of box, what we've described is anytime you use a virtualized EC2 instance, you get the support that we guarantee no access, operator access to that. And then the second is setting up a Nitro enclave as well. So there's a little bit more work there for a customer to actively do to set up that enclave. But one, we can drop a link in for folks to check out our Nitro Enclaves page, which is an awesome place to get started. But maybe you want to, at a high level, JD, describe a little bit on how to get started for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so there's a shared responsibility model at AWS, right? And so some of the things, like securing the underlying infrastructure ultimately fall into AWS's responsibility. On top of that, there's how you configure your own applications. And that's where I think, right, how you work with and what you do to set up your Nitro Enclave is something that's in the, or anything really, in AWS, is something that's in the customer side of the responsibility model. But one of the things that's really important, I think, to understand about AWS is that we're there with you side by side, even when we're in the customer side of the responsibility model. We're always looking for ways to enable our customers to have more success, even in the areas that they're responsible for. And that's a big part of how we built Nitro Enclaves, was really to enable customers to build these types of advanced systems with relative simplicity. Right? I don't like to say something is easy or hard because different people have different. What I can say is
that doesn't surprise me, Art.
What I can say is I don't have things like low-level CPU register programming type of ability, but I'm able to jump in and build out a POC for an LLM Nitro Enclave application with relative ease because I can use all the same types of tools that I'm used to using. Really, the idea with a Nitro Enclave is that you put your application inside, and it's in a special environment that just doesn't have things like persistent storage or network connections. It's isolated around, but it can still run the same types of code. And then you do a little bit of wiring up to communicate over with your parent instance to be able to provide inputs and outputs over what is effectively a socket, if you're familiar with that paradigm in programming. And so, I think ultimately then what you're able to do is kind of just create this environment. That environment is able to prove to other services through a process called attestation exactly what code is running in there. So if you can look through your code and be comfortable that it does only the things that you want it to do, and no things that you don't.
That's key.
Yeah.
Then you can actually take that and prove to your other services and say that I am this exact specific set of code that was previously reviewed and approved to only do approved things, such as never returning the underlying model weights of the model.
Right.
And that can be integrated really nicely with KMS, our key management service, so that you can actually perform encryption and limit the scope or ability to decrypt a secret piece of information only to approved code running in a Nitro Enclave.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to make mention is you don't even have to just trust the three of us out there or the discussion for this. One, it's a little bit late now, unfortunately. Earlier today and yesterday, we did a session here, what we call a builder session, which is a hands-on session here, which allowed you to set up an LLM. Excuse me, how to protect an LLM using a Nitro Enclave. So set up your Nitro Enclaves to do that. But Jasmine, this is my little plug for the New York Summit, where many of us, actually I will not be at New York this year, but we will be broadcasting live from the AWS Summit in New York. And I encourage folks, if you have an interest, we're going to actually run this builder session in New York. So if you have an interest in learning more about a hands-on way to create a enclave to protect a large language model, you can do that there. Yeah. And I highly encourage people to take advantage of these builder sessions.
Exactly. Well, this was awesome. I've learned so much about security and data privacy in generative AI, Nitro Enclaves. I want more, JD. I want to pick your brain. I didn't realize that you had the leverage of being formerly an attorney. Once an attorney, always an attorney. But just the right person to be working on this. But this has been phenomenal. You got some great conversation here in the chat. If you want to learn more, go visit the Generative AI security page on the AWS website. We've dropped a link here in the chat for you. But that's all the time that we have, and we'll be back with more AWS On Air after this.